So back when I was in college, I had a big problem. See, I had fallen in with a bad crowd, made some poor choices, and I'm not proud of it, but yeah, I've become a poli-sci major. Some of you might know that left me with just two choices, law school or prison. Now, there are many unpleasant things about becoming a lawyer. Obviously, once you pass the bar, there is, of course, the ritual where they remove your soul. What they don't tell you is that procedure is actually performed by a proctologist. But one of the most unpleasant things about going to law school is just getting into law school, the LSAT exam. Now, I was scheduled to take the LSAT in February, and I had taken a few practice tests, and I had not done well. But I had a plan. I was going to devote my entire holiday vacation to preparing for the LSAT exam. And I had the perfect place to be level of isolation, that without any distractions, any fun, any entertainment. My mother's new apartment in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yes, Kalamazoo does exist. Now, my parents had recently separated for the 20th or 30th time, and I was really glad to be there for my mom because I knew she didn't want to celebrate Christmas by herself. And more importantly, my mom was determined that this time the separation was going to stick, and and I wanted to be there, to be supportive, to be her new heterosexual gal pal, to help hold her hand as she took baby steps back into the dating pool. As you'll see, my mother and I probably have a little too close a relationship. And when I got there, she had a surprise for me. My dad had moved back in. I believe my exact words are, "Hey, Dad, what the fuck?" Don't get me wrong, I love my parents dearly, and they've been married a long time. But over the previous couple of years, it had become clear to absolutely everybody, except my parents, that they were completely incompatible. Talking orange juice and toothpaste. And so I thought, though, that my parents, though, seemed convinced that they were just one heartfelt conversation away from really reconciling and marital bliss. A conversation that somehow had not happened in 30 years of marriage. But I believed that I could still make this work. I would just avoid them. Which is going to be especially difficult in a 2-bedroom apartment where my mother had already turned one of the bedrooms into a walk-in closet. But I thought, no, I'll just make myself a little space there in the back of her closet amongst her handbags, belts, and her shoes. So many shoes. And somehow I thought I would not be distracted by their bickering and their failed attempts at marital reconciliation. Oh, I was mistaken. I wasn't even done unpacking there among my mother's accessories when my mother called to me. "Zachary, please come to the living room. We're going to order pizza, and I want to know what toppings you want." I got in the living room. Mom says, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk about how your father crushed my dreams and destroyed my life." So we're not getting pizza? Now, my father, who in the drama that was my family never had a speaking part, commented, it's like, I wouldn't use those words to describe our marriage. Which for my dad might as well have been one of Hamlet's soliloquies. I tried to kind of placate my parents, but my mom was on a roll. And I knew it was better than to interrupt. Mom declared, "Don't you see? I was going to do something with my life. I was going to contribute to society. I was going to make the world a better place. I was going to be an interior decorator." I had a lot of unexpressed thoughts in that moment as I went through the next 2 weeks. What I did not say to my mom was, yes, I know. My father, working in a career as a medical examiner, had kind of taken away a lot of his social skills. But more importantly, my dad had provided well for our family. And my mom had had a variety of jobs. She had been an interior decorator. She had been a party planner and a travel agent. And my dad had not only been supportive, he had more importantly bankrolled all of these endeavors. The problem was that my mother had a wonderful imagination, a great eye for details, but very strong opinions. And not a lot of patience for people who did not agree with her opinions. Her career as a travel agent struggled because she had real difficulty booking people on vacations to places that she found tacky. So that meant no cruises, no trips to Vegas. And the last straw was when a young couple came in and wanted to have a 2-week honeymoon in Branson, Missouri. My mother came home in tears, blubbering, "I just don't understand what could possibly be romantic about Yakov Smirnoff and the Oak Ridge Boys." For the next few days, I continued to try and avoid my parents and focus on my LSAT prep. Till one night, I needed food. So I snuck into the kitchen and grabbed a fistful of Kraft Singles and a bottle of Jack Daniels. I was just about to scurry back to my hiding place in the back of the closet when my mother ambushed me. It was dark in the kitchen, and for a split second I thought maybe Jurassic Park style, if I just froze, I would fade from her field of vision. My mother looked at me and said, "Zachary, I am not a velociraptor." She looked at the cheese and whiskey in my hands and said, "Please take your dinner into the living room. I need your help. I need to tell your father that he needs to immediately become emotionally available." I continued to be shocked, and after 30 years of marriage, my parents did not seem to know each other at all. I don't know if anyone has ever instantaneously become emotionally available on command, but I know for a fact, if that person does exist, it was not my father. I love my dad dearly. I considered him one of my best friends. But just the year before, I had sat him down with a couple beers and I had asked him, "Dad, what was it really like for you in Vietnam?" My dad looked at me and said, "Not fun. But, the food was a lot better than I would expected." But then he got a distant look in his eyes and he turned back to me and said, "Hey, you think the Red Wings will go deep in the playoffs this year?" And I, being his son, said, "I don't know, Dad. If Eisenman stays healthy, they got a chance." As difficult and distracting as it was to deal with my parents' irrational ideas and strong emotions, and just being difficult in general, it actually was helping me prepare for the LSAT. Because the LSAT is supposed to test your ability to be rational and logic and use reasoning, but the exam itself is full of the most difficult, irritating, irrational people you will ever encounter in a real or hypothetical scenario. The LSAT is full of hypothetical situations. A frequent one is literally called the dinner party. And it gives you this fact pattern. Larry is planning a dinner party. He has invited Andy and Barbara. Andy and Barbara must sit together. Barbara must sit at Andy's right hand. Claire and David must also sit next to each other, but Claire refuses to sit next to Barbara. And Edgar refuses to sit across the table from David. And Felix demands to sit at the head of the table. And then you have to answer all these questions about what Larry should do. But none of them gives you the most rational option that there is, which is Larry should order a pizza, cancel this party, and get himself some better friends. But I was continuing to improve my score, and especially because I found a new hiding place, the hall bathroom. I was perched on the toilet there doing practice tests one afternoon when my mother banged on the door. "Zachary, you've been in there for 2 hours. I know you're hiding or you're eating way too much cheese. Come out right now." I made the mistake of opening the door, and my mother then said to me the second most horrifying thing I have ever heard in my life. She was, "Please come in the living room. I want to discuss your father and I's lack of sexual intimacy." What I should have done in that moment was immediately jump back in the bathroom, dived headfirst into the toilet, and tried to flush myself to freedom. Because then I would have avoided hearing the most horrifying thing I've ever heard in my life. And they said, "You don't understand. Just the other night, I was all prepared to seduce your father. I was dressed in this lovely lingerie, and everything was ready, and then he just couldn't perform." Yeah. And in that moment, I think my dad was sitting over here. I don't know, because my dad might as well have been Medusa opening the Ark of the Covenant. There was no way I was looking over there. And I am sure that my father was completely not looking at me. A few days later, I returned to school. I eventually took the LSAT and did go to law school. And as difficult and as painful and as awkward as those 2 weeks were with my parents, I've always been grateful for that time. Less than 2 years later, I lost both my parents. So I didn't have as much time with them as other people, especially as an adult. But I was glad for that time with them because then I did get to see them through the eyes of an adult. I did get to see them as real people, their real emotions, their flaws and their shortcomings. And in that time, I got to learn a lot of things. I learned a lot of things I needed to know, a lot of things I wanted to know. Except for that part about my dad not being able to sexually perform. I think we all would agree that none of us, and especially me, wanted to know that or needed to know that. Thank you.